pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. That's right. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, the M&MLife. My name is Camry, where I talk about all things med school related, as well as all things ministry related as a young Christian medical student, also on my path to pursuing purpose and kind of discovering what ministry looks like for me in this season of my life. So welcome. My last video, was my welcome back into YouTube land. I've been away kind of studying for board exams, doing my surgery rotation, so like vascular surgery, gen surge, neurosurgery, and then OBGYN. So granted, I had a lot on my plate and I just needed some time away, and now I'm back. And in that first video, I discussed kind of the mental toll that studying for Step 1 can have. And kind of how I got through that and kept my faith strong. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave the link. But otherwise, this video is really going to concentrate on the nut and bolts of what I did during dedicated, things that in retrospect I wish I had done differently, things I wish I had known, etc., to hopefully help you all not fall into maybe the same pitfalls that I did. And so first and foremost, I would say decide on what resources you want to use early. And so what I mean by that, it is no secret that medical school is very expensive. Additionally, just to register to take Step 1 and get your permit to register for the exam is $645. So needless to say, it's a very expensive process. And if you have not used year 1 and year 2 to know what outside resources work well for you, you're going to be very overwhelmed and dedicated with all these things that people say they're using, that may or may not work for you because you haven't used them in the past. So first and foremost, I say before you even get to dedicated, using year 1 and year 2 to say, I really like Sketchy, I don't like Pathoma, I love Boards and Beyond, etc., and so that way by the time you get to dedicated, you've gone through a lot of that material already, so it's not like you trying to consume all of this again, but really like a high rapid review. And then also, you're not trying to consume all this information because let's be real, during dedicated, there is no way you're going to get through all of your content review you want to do as well as all those outside resources. So really get a few that are like your tried and true methods that you know work for you and stick to it. The way I approached this is I had like a primary text and a secondary like text / outside resource that I referred back to. My primary text was First Aid for the USMLE Step 1, which people say is like, oh, the Bible of Step 1 and studying. But keep in mind that it's like a high rapid review, so you need to supplement that. Of course, like my supplement was UWorld, because if you're using UWorld correctly, you're learning. Although you're doing questions, you're going back and reviewing why you got that question wrong. Even if you got it right, why did you get it right? Was it a lucky guess? Was it just you're good at process of elimination? And really reading through those answer choices is also a way of studying. I additionally use Sketchy for supplemental. I'm very much like a pictorial learner and kind of seeing things in that manner. I also use Pixorize for some of the biochem and a lot of those like glycogen storage diseases and things like that. I also use Dirty USMLE, which is a YouTube channel. And then there are a couple podcasts out there. I know people have heard of like Golgians and things like that. It personally did not work for me, but it is something out there if that's something you're interested in. What I will try to do in the comment section is collate a list of different resources that I and some of my classmates have used for you all to kind of see where those things work for you, etc., so that you can kind of plan your study schedule. As far as my primary text, I have the book here. I told myself I was going to burn it after I did Step 1, but clearly I did not. So I used First Aid USMLE Step 1. This is a 2020 edition because that's what I took or started studying. And so, as you can see, I kind of have certain pages kind of tabbed for things that I needed to go back to multiple times, high yield review that I needed to look at the day before the exam, etc. So First Aid, like I said, is a rapid review. So here's just an example of one of my pages. I would highlight, I would make notes in the margin, and I actually found, and I know this sounds crazy, but a favorite pen that writes really well and does not smudge inside of this book, and I made all my annotations here. When I would do a UWorld QBank and I would review a concept, I would find it in first aid if I was still confused and annotate, because first aid has quick mnemonics and all of this, but the meat and like bread and butter details are not there. So I would go back and add it so I didn't have to pull from different resources. And if I was confused about a topic, I could go in my first aid book and literally have anything that I would ever need to know about that topic kind of there in one place, instead of like trying to Google things and look at other notes and other resources, etc. So that's kind of what I did. So a typical day for me, I have an Excel spreadsheet where I literally planned out my days, and then I also had an overall schedule of what needed to get done that week. And I will insert a screenshot here, both of like what my days look like, as well as then what a typical week would look like. And I did that for all of Dedicated because life still happens. So if you have important things that are going on, that should also be added in there as well. So like for me, my birthday fell during Dedicated. I did not have a huge celebration. One, because we're in a pandemic. Two, I was in the middle of Dedicated, but I did have like a Zoom birthday party and my friends sent me gifts. And so like I set aside time where I got on Zoom with my friends and family and opened my gifts. So kind of things like that you kind of want to put into your schedule. But I'll insert a screenshot here of what my schedule looked like and then kind of talk you guys through it. So I included this screenshot of my weekly schedule first, and my weekly schedule included the days of the week, what actual day it was, what practice questions I was going to do for that day, or if I was going to practice M&MLife, as well as the content that I plan to get through that day. And then the last column has any sketchy videos or Boards and Beyond videos that I needed to get through during that week and had them listed out. I also went through and actually like typed out how many sketchy videos there are, how many Boards and Beyond videos there are, so that I was able to fit it all into this weekly schedule. And then the next thing we have is just my daily schedule that I followed each day during the week to ultimately reach my weekly goals. Here's my schedule, and so I would wake up around 6 a.m., I would do like my morning devotional, I would grab a quick breakfast, and I would be ready to study by 7. And I would study and do content review, right? So whether that be reading through first aid, whether that be picking a topic and looking at a video on Boards and Beyond that I maybe didn't understand, I do content review to a certain time. And I think I would probably do that till about 10. And then I would do 40 questions, so a 40 question block in UWorld from 10 to 12. And then I would break from 12 to 1 to eat lunch. Then I would come back, review those questions if I didn't do it in tutor mode, which means that I was reviewing as I went. And then I would do a little bit more content review. And then that would take me up until about dinner time. I would eat dinner, come back, do another question block, review that. And this is earlier in Dedicated. I try to get in like 2 blocks per day. As Dedicated kind of picked up, then I was doing, like 120, so 3 blocks a day. So, it kind of varies, but in general, that's what I would do. And then after dinner, I kind of be wiped out. So instead of doing questions and content review, that's when I would supplement with like, my Pixarize or my Sketchy, or things like that I was still learning, but it wasn't as taxing on my brain. And then for my mental health, other med students will be like, no, you need to keep going. I'm sorry. If I wake up at 6 a.m., realistically, to push myself when I'm not retaining anything does not happen. So about 10 p.m., like Camry was like, okay, that was a great day. And I would actually watch a show. I'm going to be honest, I probably haven't watched more Netflix in my life than I have during Dedicated, because I am the type of person, I can't just close my books at 10, go to bed by 10:15 and go to sleep. My brain would still be on, and this might sound crazy, and I would try to do that, and I would dream about lysosomes, or like I would dream about a disease process. So for me, I close my books at 10, I watch a show as I kind of wind down, and then I go to sleep, and then I wake up and do it again the next day. So that was kind of my schedule. I also built in at least one. I originally wanted it to be one full day off where I wasn't doing any studying at all, but I would start to get study guilt. So I built in one half day, and typically for me that was on Sundays because that's when I go to church, and that's my rest days. So Sundays are my day where I either would only do a half day of studying or not study as hard or go as hard as I would during the week, and that was kind of good for my sanity. So that's kind of what I did during Dedicated. Those are the resources that I used. I also kind of built in my practice exams, which, by the way, are an additional $60 to buy them, so budget that in as well. But I would build in days for practice exams, and then don't forget to give yourself time to review those practice exams from the M&MLife so that you're learning from them. People will say like, oh, you got to get in questions, but if you aren't budgeting the time to learn from those questions to know what you did well, what you might need to improve on, then it's not beneficial. So make sure that you kind of have that time in your schedule for that. So one, kind of making sure you know what resources work for you, what resources don't. And then also, once you make your plan, sticking to it. And what I mean by that is, of course, life happens. You're going to get off course. You're going to have to readjust it. But it can be overwhelming to a certain extent, right? You kind of planned out these 6 weeks. And of course, you're going to get behind. Of course, there'll be some days where you can do more or less and you have to take a mental health day. But try your best to kind of stick to that plan, just so that you make sure that you go through everything you need to go through, to make sure that you are covering all the information that you need to cover. In terms of advice for making your schedule, for me, I front-loaded the things I knew I was weak in. So like if you know that you're weak in cardio palm, or you know that you're weak in neuro, make sure that you kind of cover those earlier. And I say that because earlier in Dedicated, you kind of have a little bit more time to dedicate to those things versus at the end when you're kicking it in high gear and there's not much time left, and you don't have as much time to dedicate to weak subjects. So I front loaded the weak subjects, so that way I could really get a good grasp on those and continue to kind of review them as Dedicated goes on. But also I knew that as I got towards the end of Dedicated, things that I was really good at, it was just, a quick review, making sure I still had the nuts and bolts of it and really getting those fine granular details for things that were really high yield. My next piece of advice is M&MLife actually posts almost like a syllabus that you have in undergrad of all your courses. They post a list of topics for every basic science thing that will be on step 1, and I use that to tailor my studying. One thing about med school is a lot of curriculums emphasize certain things. So for example, I go to the Ohio State University College of Medicine. And of course, if you've heard of Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, that is kind of a really big deal at Ohio State because it's where the disease and the pathophysiology of it was kind of discovered. So needless to say, our curriculum harps on that. And if it's one thing you know as a graduate of the Ohio State University College of Medicine, it is about that disease, and how to manage it and how to treat it. However, for step 1, that might not be that big of a deal. And so what my school emphasized and what I needed to know for my exams for med school might not necessarily directly correlate with what M&MLife wants me to know for step 1. And so if you look through that syllabus, and I will try to put a link in the description box that kind of has, that goes straight to that so you can see it. I also use that to guide my studying so that if there was something that was maybe only covered 20% versus 30%, I knew how to budget out my time when I made my schedule. So make sure that you're kind of looking at that so you're not, for lack of a better term, wasting your studying on things that won't help you to maximize your score in the long run. And then I'll also add the practice M&MLife. So, of course, everyone's going to say, do them, review them. as well as like UWorld self-assessments. And you'll go online and you'll go on Reddit and there'll be a bunch of forums about, oh, this is harder, or like the free M&MLife 120. So like everyone will say like, oh, these are harder, do them in this order, do them in this order, the curve is really bad on this practice, M&MLife, UWorld self-assessment under-predicted me, M&MLife over-predicted me. Everyone is different. So here's my advice about all that. Stay off of Reddit, stay off of Student Doctor Network. And some of you are like, oh, that might help me. It is like unnecessary stress. And I was that person after I took step 1. I walked out thinking like, oh my gosh, like I bombed it. And what did I do? Open up Reddit, start to look through like people who had taken step 1 the same day as me. And like, what did they think about it? Was I overreacting? And honestly, it does not put you in a good mental space, like at all. It doesn't. If you have questions, reach out to like a trusted friend, reach out to like an older med student, but please do not torture yourself. It's already torture to wait for your results to come back. Like, you don't need that negative energy. And then last but not least, trust yourself and trust your training. My mentor would always say that whenever we would go into OSCEs or like different situations where it's like, am I really capable? Can I really do this? Yes, you have been in med school for these past couple years. At times during dedicated, it might feel like, did I learn anything? But you did, and you know more than you think you know. So just take a deep breath as you kind of approach dedicated, as you approach kind of going into step 1, to really say like, okay, I got this. Really center yourself in your thinking and trust that everything you learned is still there, didn't magically disappear, and just think through each option. And then my last piece of advice is about breaks. So everyone knows kind of the structure of step 1, where you kind of have your 40 question blocks, and then you also have, I think, a total of 30-minute break time, but that's kind of like, you know, split up however you decide to split that up. I did my practice M&MLife kind of mirroring those breaks just so that on game day or test day, I knew how exactly I was going to budget my time, what I wanted to do with my breaks, how long I wanted to take for lunch, etc., etc. I did a dry run to the testing center. I got my lunch ready the night before, and I really knew going in, like, I'm going to take a 5-minute stretch break after this block. I'm going to eat a quick snack, get some water, and then I know I'm going to take 15 minutes here. Kind of knowing yourself and knowing when you need longer breaks. Like, I was able to take a really long lunch break, but it was because I had been, like, practicing that way, and I knew, I'm going to take a 5-minute break here. I'm not going to break after that section. Then I'm going to take a really nice lunch break to recenter myself, and then come back. And one thing that kind of flipped me out that I didn't know, which was different from the MCAT, was that, like, you can leave and not, like, leave the testing center never to return. But at my testing center, like, you could go outside. So, like, I ate lunch outside with a breath of fresh air, and I didn't know that at first. And so, like, kind of knowing those little quirks about your testing center can kind of help reduce a lot of anxiety. So, like, I ate outside. Some places were like, oh, you can have access to your phone. You know, I was a little too freaked out to even try that, but some people, like, called their parents in between. That's not my cup of tea, but there were some people who, like, during breaks grabbed their phone. So, I mean, kind of knowing those certain aspects of the testing center and their rules and regulations, as well as what works best for you, I think is paramount, and planning that ahead of time so you're not on test day like, oh, I can do that, or oh, I was supposed to know that. So you're not kind of caught by surprise. Test day is already stressful enough. You don't really want to do anything that adds to it. So that's kind of what I did for dedicated. Once again, kind of send me your questions about dedicated, and I'll do like a sit-down Q&A with you about all things med school. But I also wanted to use this time. Someone asked me before I kind of went away and dropped off the face of the earth to study for step 1, to do a video about staying motivated to study in general, which is also a really big thing in step 1. And so I said I had my half day where I didn't study. And during that half day, I, reached out to my family and friends, the people who keep me grounded. I made sure that I was doing my devotionals and in my word and praying, and make sure that I had that time away to kind of recenter myself, because it is very easy to get lost in the work and feel like you're drowning and studying and kind of losing sight of the bigger picture. And so for me, that was very helpful. But also in staying motivated to study. Also remembering that this is just a season, whether you're studying for step 1, step 2, step 3, or just another exam, you're a pre-med. It's literally just a season. It feels like never ending. You feel like I'm always studying, but there is an end. And so I think kind of telling yourself, like, I just have to buckle down and get through this. And then kind of rewarding yourself. I talked about in my Balancing Life and Med School video about how I kind of did away with to-do lists because they stressed me out, and making like I accomplished lists. I did that a lot during Dedicated as well, because obviously I had my to-do list, right? I had a schedule of things that I needed to do, and I am very detail oriented. So the schedules were like down to a T of like when I eat, when I rest, so things like that. So in the midst of that, instead of comparing at the end of the day, did I cross everything off my to-do list, I would ignore that and I would write out, oh, I accomplished blah, 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 blah today. And then, of course, I would still go back to my to-do list just in case I needed to readjust my next day in terms of studying to get everything done that I needed to get done. But it was helpful for me because I ended my days not necessarily yelling at myself for saying, you didn't accomplish everything that you had set out to accomplish today. But instead, it was, wow, look at everything that you were able to do today. And so for me, that was really helpful. So those are kind of my tips and tricks kind of about Dedicated, what I did for step 1. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember to finish each day strong, but always remember to finish each day whole. As always, if you have any questions about anything med school related, let me know. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.